my name is Kaylee. Today we're going to learn about presidential elections. Okay, let's get started. Let's do a quick review about elections and voting in the United States. Remember, an election is the process of voting to choose someone to be the political leader or representative of the people in a government. People who want to be political leaders and are running for office are called candidates. Most candidates for president are politicians. That means they've worked in government before, either as a governor or a representative or a senator in the legislative branch. But you don't already have to be a politician to run for office. In the United States, we have a two-party system. This means there are two major political parties that candidates can belong to. These parties are called Democrat and Republican. So let's start from the beginning. There are some qualifications laid out in the United States Constitution about who can become a candidate for president. The three main ones are: a president must be a citizen of the United States by birth. Even though there are other ways to become a U.S. citizen, if you want to be the president, you have been born in the U.S. or to parents that are U.S. citizens. The president must be 35 years old and have been a resident of the United States for at least 14 years. Anyone who meets those three qualifications can become a candidate for president. There are many people who want to be the president of the United States. All of these people have different ideas about how the government should act and work. People with similar ideas tend to belong to the same political party. Any of these people can then start campaigning. Remember, campaigning is when a candidate gives speeches about their ideas, has debates with other candidates, and runs advertisements to convince voters to vote for them. Once a candidate has spent over $5,000 campaigning, they have to declare their candidacy for president and register with the Federal Election Commission. The Federal Election Commission is an agency that enforces the laws about how money can be raised or spent by a candidate who is campaigning. Remember, there can be many people who are campaigning to be president. It's common for each political party to have at least 10 people campaigning to be president. To cut down on the number of candidates, the candidates go through state primaries and caucuses. The presidential election is split into two voting phases. The first phase is voting for the nomination in the primaries and the caucuses. The primaries and the caucuses occur on different days in different states. Some states only have primary elections, some states only have caucuses, and some states have both. But what's the difference between the two? Primary elections, often called a primary, are held by state or local governments. In a primary, voters choose their preference for a presidential candidate on a secret ballot. Primaries are very similar to other elections held in the U.S. A caucus, on the other hand, is run by the political parties themselves. At a caucus, people gather in groups based on which candidate they support. They give speeches and try to convince other voters to join their group. Based on how many votes a candidate received in a primary election or caucus, they move on to the national conventions. Each political party holds a convention or a meeting of the political party. The formal purpose of the national convention is to choose the party's presidential nominee, or the single candidate that will be represented by the party in the election. Each U.S. state has rules for who can participate in the national convention. Each state is given a number of voters who represent their state. The number of voters is based on the state's population, how many Congress members belong to the political party, and how the state usually votes, Democrat or Republican. These special voters are called delegates. At the National Convention, the presidential nominee chooses their running mate, the vice president. Then the presidential nominees of each party campaign throughout the country to win the support of the general population, the everyday citizens who will vote in the general election. Now that each party has a nominee for president and vice president, the country holds a general election. The presidential general election happens every 4 years on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. In the general election, each registered voter votes for one president and one vice president on a ballot. But then it gets a little tricky. Each voter isn't actually voting for the president. They're voting for a group of people called electors. In every other election in the United States, the winning candidate is the person who won the most votes. This is called the popular vote. But in the presidential election, the United States uses a process called the Electoral College. The Electoral College is a group of people called electors. Each state gets a certain number of electors, the same number of representatives the state has in Congress. That means a total of 538 electors. Each state's political parties choose the electors, and after the general election, the electors for each state each cast one vote for president and vice president. In most states, the electors must vote for the same candidate that won the popular vote in their state. But in some states, the elector can vote for a candidate that did not win the state's popular vote. The Electoral College votes in December, and the presidential nominee who wins at least 270 electoral votes, which is more than half of all the Electoral College votes, wins the presidential election. The newly elected president and vice president are inaugurated in January. Being inaugurated is just a fancy word for saying they begin their jobs as president and vice president. Now you know how the president and vice president are elected in the United States. It's quite a big process. Practice what you've learned by doing the online games and quizzes. Have fun, and remember to always be clever. Hey, hey.